Hello everyone, welcome to MediaNama. If you're a parent, you've probably had concerns about what your teens are seeing or who they're talking to on social media. Instagram has introduced something called teen accounts, and these accounts are packed with features designed to give parents and teens more control over their Instagram usage. First up, Instagram is giving teens more control over their experience on the app with new personalization tools. Teens can now select their topics that they want to see more of on the Explore page and in the recommendations. It has also created private accounts by default. All teens under 16 will have private accounts, meaning they have to approve who follows them, and only those people can see their content. It also has messaging restrictions, wherein teens will only be able to receive messages from people they follow or are already connected to. Further, they have sensitive content controls, where they will automatically be placed within the strictest setting for sensitive content. That means they'll see fewer posts related to topics like violence or cosmetic procedures in places like Explore or Reels. Further, they have limited interactions where they can only be tagged or mentioned by people they follow. And Instagram's strongest anti bullying tools will also be employed to filter out harmful words and phrases from comments and direct messages. They also have time management tools where teens will get reminders to log off after 60 minutes of use per day, and sleep mode that will mute notifications from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. to help them wind down at night. Parents have the option to approve any changes if their teen wants to loosen the restrictions. But for older teens, they can choose to enable supervision for teens who are more than 16 plus years of age, giving them oversight over what they want. Parents will be able to see who their teen is messaging in the last 7 days. Not the content of the messages, but who they're chatting with. Plus, parents can also set daily time limits for how long their teens can use Instagram and even block them from using the app at certain times, like during a school night or exams. The changes will roll out in the US and UK, Canada, and Australia first, with other countries to follow. We're here with MediaNama founder and editor Nikhil Pava. Nikhil, what do you think are the benefits of teen accounts, both for parents and teens alike?
Thanks, Simon. So, look, frankly, some of these features I would like them for myself because, I have a bit of screen addiction, and but I'm also the parent of a 16-month-old. So I keep thinking about screen addiction, device addiction, dopamine hits, how things are going to evolve in terms of social media access over the next 15, 16, 17 years that he'll be using the internet, and how do we gradually give him access to devices while also ensuring that there isn't dependence and there is an addiction to these devices or exposure to unsavory content. So these are things that a parent goes through all the time. There are parents I know who've actually benefited from allowing their children access to devices early on. They started coding early, they started building their own things. And there are parents I know who've completely avoided it, and they're actually worried about at times about their kids either being too addicted, if they've if for parents who've allowed, and for kids parents who haven't allowed their kids access to devices, they're sometimes addicted. They're worried about the fact that they might not be tech savvy enough, or they might not know how to use different tools and services and build things online. So it's a bit of a it's almost like it's such a fine balance. It's very tricky, right? And that's exactly what I guess Instagram and all global social media platforms face when trying to get kids to or trying to regulate how kids use the internet. It's what regulators also are challenged with when it comes to how kids use the internet. But in terms of principles, right, and what Instagram has done here is that it's given parents more control. So I'd rather prefer parental control over government control, because government control is often like a very hard rule, a very hard stick to sort of exercise control with. But giving parents more control over how teens use the internet, as guardians, is a better option. It also emphasizes a stress point in terms of internet users, in the sense that uh, as I started using the internet when I was very young, and I'm sure so have you, and there's a tension between independence in terms of using the internet versus parental oversight, right? So Meta's strategy of requiring parental consent for changes the way they've approached it. It looks like it's an attempt to empower both parties. But as teens sort of seek more freedom online, there will be challenges there. But we'll get into that later. But automating protections like messaging restrictions, they're reducing harmful exposure or exposure to harmful interactions. There is, for example, attempts at grooming on all these platforms. There are people who portray themselves as kids, but they're not, and so some amount of control in terms of just visibility, who your child is messaging, um, is helps ease some concerns, even, and it also maintains the privacy of a child in terms of what that message contains. And of course, parents can still take devices physically from their kids and exercise more control, but just an oversight helps, right? But platforms also need to ensure a couple of things. One, that teens aren't able to bypass these restrictions and, for example, take control over their parents' account. They are at times far more savvy than their parents are. Although I think now we have a generation of parents, as opposed to, let's say, 5 years ago, we have a generation of parents that is almost native to the internet. So they know how these things work and are able to exercise control. But the previous generation did not. So, there were kids who were often helped their parents use the internet. Um, so these restrictions will also have to evolve over time as Instagram learns more and more, and mechanisms of preventing children from taking control over their parents' Instagram account and control over settings. All of that battle is going to play out, I think, for one. Introducing default accounts, I mean, introducing privates account by default is, I think, a great feature. This should be there for everyone. You should start with your accounts being private and slowly then decide how and when and whom to give access to what you're posting. Um, Public by default, as much as we like to consume this content, uh, uh, is is uh, is not necessarily the best thing, because quite often people don't realize how much information about themselves they are releasing onto the internet. So people can figure out where someone might be at a particular point in time if they've gone done, let's say, a live, as an example, or they posted a photo from where they are, and they say that they're at that location, right? So those are all risks that people face, but don't they do it unknowingly. And so private by default or a controlled group by default is a much better option. I love the idea of time limits. I wish I had them, and I try to impose them sometimes. And because I have control over my own devices, I have to bypass my own controls. But time limits by default is also a great option, and I think they should be there for grown-ups as well. It's not just kids who need help with screen addiction, you know. Um, Lastly, on this parent and child thing, I think the move to filter sensitive content is useful. It could dramatically reduce children's exposure to harmful material, to violent and inappropriate posts. And actually, I don't understand why platforms don't have a safe mode by default for most users, right? Um, and I wish, for example, Twitter had that, because at times you come across disturbing graphic images or videos, and even though there's a disclaimer that, or there's a warning that this is a graphic video, at times you end up watching it. And I think there should be a mechanism to filter that content out by default. But again, this is a very tricky battle, because even Meta will have to ensure that its algorithms do not, inadvertently censor educational or important social discussions, or certain controversies that help people understand the world around them better. So that censorship thing is also tricky, also because this changes as people grow older. So someone who's, let's say, 12 years old or 14 years old may have maybe should not be exposed to more sensitive content. Someone who's 16 or 17 or 15, 16, 17, depending on their own maturity, should be allowed to choose what they view and what they don't view. Although it's different for each child, is different for each person. So this is a very tricky balance. And how algorithms control access to content in that sense is also something that's Meta will still have to, I think, figure out over a period of time. My sense is this is just the beginning of that entire uh, control slash restriction regime. It's going to get more nuanced with time, probably. I don't know if right now it's just for 16 and below, with parents having the option of increasing the age of control post that. But subsequently, you could also have a different regime for, uh, let's say, under 13 or under 14 as well, which would be more restriction and more control because a revolution takes time.
You touched upon this briefly, but what are the possible areas of concern that you see with these new provisions?
Yeah, so like I said, like over policing of content could stifle like your exposure to diverse perspectives and undermining your ability to engage critically with the world around them. I remember uh, when everyone around me thought I was like I'm a kid, and I was a kid at that time. But I remember going on to online forums at that time, sitting in a cyber cafe, and we used to have like conversations on everything from cricket and bowling choices in cricket to even nuclear deterrence and the defense shields and CTBT, and so those kind of conversations kids have. Like we have debating societies in schools. That ability to access diverse perspectives allows us to engage critically with the world, allows us to get different perspectives that may not be the kind of stuff that's force fed to us in school textbooks. And that engagement is important, right? So these protections might reduce harmful interactions, but uh, I want to make sure that they also don't stop us from engaging with difficult topics, because that's how we grow as people, right? And we've all benefited from maturely engaging with difficult topics. That's how society also matures. But the other thing is that, for people who want to have those conversations, um, you know, this overregulation could also drive teens to less controlled platforms, away from highly controlled platforms like Instagram, right? So there are potential unintended consequences of them pushing younger users to less secure digital environments, where parents have no oversight, they have no visibility over how things are happening. So this is a very fine balance, both from a platform perspective but also from a parental perspective, because parents also want to ensure that there is access to critical conversations, the kind we engage in, uh, let's say, at a dinner table. Um, and the world gives us an opportunity to have a wider conversation around the same conversations, right? Around the same issues. But we also don't want them getting access to very harmful content. Like, for example, in the recent controversy about exploding pages against the Hezbollah, right? That's a very nuanced and very difficult conversation. But visuals of exploding pages, well, that are also circulating on the internet, are extremely disturbing and can have, and it might not be easy for someone to pass it if they're very young in that, or they may not pass it well enough when they're very young. They might develop particular bias. So these are all very difficult, tricky conversations. And that's why regulating platforms is tricky. The other aspect is that requiring age verification is even trickier. So, under India's data protection law, which has still not been actioned, India has verified parental consent, which means effectively your parental consent needs to be verified. But how do you know someone's a kid and someone's not a kid? So that by that logic, everyone needs to be verified, and that's something which the government is also struggling with. Um, reliance on tech solutions to identify underage users are fraught with privacy risks as well. And there are people who go through their own journey of initially being anonymous, then being pseudonymous, and then maybe putting just their name out there, and then maybe putting up the details of their country out there. We've all gone through that process, especially on new platforms or platforms that we are new to, where we disclose a little bit of information as we go along, right? So, so verification basically appends all of that. How do you bring proportionality and choice into this idea of verification is very tricky. Think of an LGBTQ kid who's discovering themselves online, right? And maybe they don't want to be identified, and they don't want the platform identifying them because they fear that their data might leak or they might be identified. So will these platforms then restrict their participation because verification is something they don't want to do? And so requiring age verification and even from a government perspective, mandating age verification is a very, very problematic thing, um, because it doesn't allow evolution and exploration and choice to an individual as well. So, like I said, there are no easy answers over here. This is a very tricky balance to strike. But with Instagram taking the lead here, although Google also has YouTube Kids and they have parental controls over emails, etc. I think this is a sign of things to come. There will be more platforms. TikTok also has a separate platform for kids as well. How this plays out and how different platforms take a different approach is going to be an interesting thing that we will see evolve over the next few years, I think.
All right. Thank you, Nikhil. If you would like to learn more about this and tech policy in general, please check out MediaNama's website. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, please check out MediaNama's YouTube channel. Thank you.